Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take the world's most extensive, complex, and often overlooked subjects and perform a total knowledge extraction just for you.
Today we are attempting to comprehend, well, the sheer scale of the most successful group of organisms on Earth. We're diving into the world of the undisputed biological champions. The beetles. That's the order Coleoptera.
We talk about biodiversity a lot, but the scale here it's really something else, isn't it? When we use words like champion or heavyweight, it's not just talk, it's statistical fact.
Oh, absolutely. The numbers are staggering. As of today, there are roughly 400,000 described species of beetles.
400,000.
And to put that in perspective, that single number accounts for nearly 40% of all described arthropods. But here's the real kicker. About 25%, a quarter of all known animal species on this planet, is a beetle.
Wow. 1 in 4 animals that we've identified and cataloged is a beetle. That kind of statistic just stops you in your tracks.
It really does. And that's just the described species, you know. Based on ecological models, the rate of new discoveries, conservative estimates suggest the true total could be anywhere between, say, 0.9 million and maybe even 2.1 million species globally.
That's an unbelievable range.
It is. The sheer magnitude is why we really have to start with that quote, the one that perfectly sums up their biological supremacy.
The famous story, maybe true, maybe not, about the geneticist J.B.S. Haldane.
Exactly. When Haldane was asked what his, extensive study of creation revealed about the creator, his supposed response was just an inordinate fondness for beetles.
And when you look at the numbers, their success across time and space, it makes a lot of sense.
It becomes a pretty compelling point, yeah.
So our mission today is to figure out why. What's the secret sauce? What is it in the beetle blueprint that let them colonize pretty much everywhere and evolve into so many forms? We need to look at their armor, their unique biology.
Their metabolic tricks, their survival strategies.
Yeah. And the explanation has to start with the defining physical trait, that incredible armor. Specifically, the hardened front wings, the elytra.
Right, and even the scientific name, Coleoptera, it tells that story straight away.
It does, Coleoptera. It comes straight from ancient Greek. Koleos means sheath. And tarnon means wing.
Sheathed wings.
Literally. It's all about that protective casing they wear.
But interestingly, the common English name, beetle, it focuses more on offense, not defense.
That's true. It comes from the Old English bitella, meaning little biter, which is related to baton, to bite.
So whether you see them as armored tanks or tiny biters, people have recognized their core traits for a very long time.
Okay, let's move into eye distribution and morphology. The beetle blueprint. With hundreds of thousands of species, they must be incredibly adaptable. Where do we find them?
Pretty much everywhere. They're global citizens. You find beetles in almost every habitat you can think of. The only real exceptions are like the deep sea trenches and the permanent ice caps.
So rainforests, deserts, underground.
Yep. Tropical canopies burrow deep near plant roots, dominating freshwater ponds and streams. They're there.
That omnipresence is key. But to really get the power of this blueprint, we have to look at the extremes it supports. The size difference alone is just wild.
It's astronomical. Seriously, take the largest. For sheer weight, the larva of the Goliath beetle, Goliath
beetle, okay.
This grub can reach at least 115 grams. That's over a quarter of a pound. And 11.5 centimeters long. It's the heaviest insect stage known.
Heavier than a small apple, like you mentioned before.
Wow. And the adult males aren't exactly small either. They often weigh between 70 and 100 grams, making them the heaviest adult insects.
Okay, heaviest. What about longest?
For length, that title goes to the Hercules beetle, Dynasty's Hercules. If you measure the full span, including that huge curved horn on its pronotum.
Right, that massive horn.
It can reach at least 16.7 centimeters.
That's like almost the length of my hand. Okay, now we need to zoom way, way in.
Yeah.
From that giant down to the smallest.
Prepare for whiplash. We have to shrink down to the scale of the smallest known free-living insect, which, surprise, surprise, is also a beetle. The featherwing beetle, Cytocella musuacensis.
Featherwing beetle. How small are we talking?
Tiny? As little as 325 micrometers long.
Micrometers. So,
yeah.
Less than half a millimeter.
Way less. You could line up like 50 of them end to end across a single centimeter. The evolutionary pressure allowing one order to span that kind of size range is just incredible.
And their success, as we said, it comes back to that basic body plan, that morphology, the armored blueprint.
Exactly. The underlying plan is super successful. You've got a distinct head, a thorax split into two parts, the pro and terathorax, and then the abdomen. And the whole thing is encased in this rigid exoskeleton made of these plates called sclerites.
Provides defense, keeps them from drying out.
Right. Defense against predators, prevents desiccation, but it's still flexible enough at the joints for them to move around.
And the star player, the elytra, those hardened forewings, usually fused down the middle, making that protective dome.
They offer amazing protection. But there's a trade-off, aerodynamically speaking. For most flying beetles, those heavy elytra have to be lifted up and held out of the way before the delicate hind wings, the actual flight wings, can unfold and start beating. So taking off can be a bit slow, a bit cumbersome.
But not all beetles stick to that exact design, do they? You see variations.
Oh, definitely. Think about rove beetles. Their elytra are really short, only covering the first few bits of the abdomen.
So less armor.
A bit less protection, yeah, but it gives them way more flexibility. They can run faster, bend their bodies more easily. Then you have soldier beetles. Their elytra are famously soft, almost leathery.
And what about the ones that just gave up flying altogether?
Good point. Species like some ground beetles, the Carabidae, they've completely lost the ability to fly. And in those cases, often the elytra have actually fused together into one solid, impenetrable shield.
Maximizes defense, maybe helps hold moisture in dry places.
Exactly. Better defense, better water retention.
And that armoring extends to the head, too. Powerful jaws and those super important antennae.
Yeah, the head's usually heavily sclerotized, often angled down or forward, houses strong mandibles for cueing. And the antenna, that's where you see some real evolutionary creativity. They're vital sensory organs detecting movement, smells, chemical.
And the shapes vary incredibly, must signal different specializations.
Totally. You see everything. Simple thread-like ones, clubbed ones, comb-like ones, like the European cockchafer, Polyphilophilo, has these amazing fan-like antennae to catch pheromones.
Wow.
Weevils, the Curculionidae family, they often have geniculate or elbowed antennae.
But the craziest adaptation you mentioned has to be the venomous antenna. That's wild.
Isn't it? The longhorn beetle, Onychocerus albitarsus, it just pushes the limit of what you'd expect an antenna to do. They actually have structures on their antenna capable of injecting venom.
A sensory organ turned weapon.
Yeah. It's a unique defense among arthropods. Shows how flexible that basic beetle blueprint is. An organ usually for sensing the air gets repurposed for chemical warfare.
Okay, last piece of the blueprint. The legs. Obviously for walking, but adapted for all sorts of things too.
Most just use them for walking, sure. But the specializations are everywhere. Aquatic beetles, like diving beetles, Thyrticidae, their hind legs are basically swimming paddles, flattened rows of long hairs.
Designed for water. What about digging?
For digging, fossorial lifestyles, you look at scarabs or clown beetles, hysterity. Their legs are wide, tough, often covered in spines, perfect for moving soil quickly, whether they're burrowing or burying dung.
Makes sense. And then there's the quick-to-get-away legs, like flea beetles.
Ah, yeah, flea beetles. They're a type of leaf beetle. Their hind legs have these massively enlarged femurs, the thigh segment, packed with muscle.
Jumping.
Exactly. They store up energy and release it in this explosive leap. Catapults them away from danger in a split second. It just shows how that simple three-part body plan is this universal toolkit for specialized functions.
All right, let's shift inside. 2. Physiology, reproduction, and life cycle. Complete metamorphosis. The success isn't just the outside armor. It's the internal machinery, too. How do they eat? How do they breathe, especially somewhere challenging like underwater?
Well, metabolically, they're often generalists. Diets vary hugely, but a lot are herbivores, breaking down tough plant matter, usually in their anterior midgut. But predatory groups, like those ground beetles, the Carabidae, they have a neat trick.
Oh, yeah.
They actually start digesting their prey outside their bodies. They regurgitate digestive enzymes from their midgut into their crop, liquefy the meal externally, and then suck up the resulting nutrient-rich soup.
Huh. Efficient. But okay, the most impressive internal trick has got to be that underwater breathing the physical gill.
This is just beautiful biological engineering meeting physics. Diving beetles need to breathe underwater, right? So when they dive, they trap a bubble of air.
Where do they keep it?
Either tucked tightly under the elytra, those wing cases, or held against the body by special water-repellent hydrophobic hairs.
So it's not just like a scuba tank with a limited supply.
Not at all. That bubble functions as a physical gill. See, the oxygen concentration inside the bubble starts lower than the dissolved oxygen in the water around it.
Okay.
So physics dictates that oxygen from the water diffuses into the bubble, constantly replenishing the supply. At the same time, metabolic waste like carbon dioxide, which dissolves easily in water, diffuses out of the bubble.
So the bubble is constantly refreshing its oxygen. That's amazing. What's the limit then? Why do they have to surface?
Ah, good question. The key is nitrogen. Air is mostly nitrogen, which doesn't dissolve easily in water, so the bubble is relatively stable. But as oxygen is used and replaced, that nitrogen does slowly dissolve out into the water.
So the bubble shrinks.
Exactly.
Okay.
As it shrinks, the partial pressure of the gases inside changes. Once the bubble gets too small, the surface area for diffusion drops, the oxygen can't get in fast enough, and that's when the beetle has to go back up. It needs to grab a fresh, full bubble of air, mainly to replenish that crucial nitrogen volume.
Wow. A time-limited, self-refreshing gas exchange system. Incredible. Okay, shifting gears completely. Fireflies. Biological light bulbs.
Right. Fireflies, the Lampyridae family, they produce light through what might be the most efficient biochemical reaction in nature. They use these special modified fat cells.
Fat cells make light?
Yep. And these cells are often backed by tiny white crystals of uric acid, which act like little reflectors, making the light seem brighter.
And the chemistry. How does the flash actually happen?
It's the oxidation of a chemical called luciferin. An enzyme, luciferase, makes this happen using ATP, the cell's energy currency, and importantly, oxygen.
And it makes light.
It makes oxluciferin, some CO2, and light with almost zero heat waste. It's incredibly efficient. And by controlling the oxygen supply very precisely, they can flash their lights on and off. That's how they talk to each other. Signal for mates. Complex dialogues in light.
Amazing. And while some talk with light, others have evolved to hear sounds, often as a defense.
That's right. Tympanal organs, basically eardrums, have been found in some groups, notably certain ground beetles and rhinoceros beetles, the Dinustinae.
What's special about their hearing?
What's really cool is that these organs are specifically tuned to ultrasonic frequencies, way above what humans can hear.
Suggesting they're listening for something specific.
The strong hypothesis: bats. It's thought these ears evolved specifically to detect the echolocation calls of hunting bats.
So they can take evasive action.
Exactly. An integrated acoustic defense system. Hear the bat coming, get out of the way.
All these amazing internal systems support them through their life cycle, which is also key to their success. Complete metamorphosis, polymetabolism.
Yes, this strategy is fundamental for many successful insects, and beetles just nail it. They go through 4 totally distinct stages. Egg, larva, often called a grub, then the pupa, sometimes called a chrysalis, and finally the adult, the imago.
And the larva is the main eating machine.
Oh yeah. The larval stage is usually the primary feeding stage. They're designed to just consume and grow. Voracious eaters.
And even the larvae look really different depending on the beetle type, right? Reflecting their lifestyle.
Absolutely. Larval shapes tell you a lot. You've got the active, flattened campodeiform larvae, like in ground beetles, fast movers. Then the tough, cylindrical, hard-shelled, elatériform larvae, people call them wireworms. Those are click beetle larvae.
Oh, wait.
And then the classic C-shaped, fleshy grubs, the scarabaeiform larvae. You find those in scarab beetles.
But some beetles take this transformation even further with hypermetamorphosis. That sounds intense.
It is intense. Hypermetamorphosis is like metamorphosis on steroids. It involves radical shifts in larval form during development, usually in parasitic species like blister beetles, the Molloidae. Let's use Epicauda vittata, a specific blister beetle, as an example.
Okay, walk us through its life.
So the first stage, the first instar, is this tiny, supermobile, long-legged larva called a triungulin. Its only job is to find a host, in this case, grasshopper egg pods. It's an active little hunter.
Finds the eggs.
Mm-hmm.
Then what?
Once it finds the egg mass and feeds for a bit, it molts. And the second stage looks completely different. It becomes a caraboid larva, slower, looks more like a typical ground beetle larva.
Right, settling down to feed.
Pretty much. Feeds for maybe another week, then molts again. Into a third form, the scarabeidoid stage, now it looks like a soft, C-shaped grub. Sedentary, just focused on storing nutrients.
Wow, 3 different larval forms.
And it's not even done. It then often enters this kind of dormant pseudo-pupa stage to survive winter before it finally makes the true pupa and then eventually becomes the adult beetle. It's a multi-stage survival toolkit built right into its development.
That developmental complexity is amazing. And it contrasts with the huge range in how long they actually live.
Right.
Some just weeks, others decades.
Yeah, lifespan varies wildly. The absolute extreme end is the ivory-marked beetle, Eburia quadrigeminata. Its larvae bore into dead or dying hardwood trees.
Tough food source.
Extremely tough, very low nutrition. So development takes a long time. There are documented cases of adult beetles emerging from furniture, floorboards, wooden beams 40 years after the wood was milled.
40 years.
40 years. And in one incredible case, 51 years. The larva was essentially in suspended animation inside the wood the whole time.
That's like biological time travel. Incredible. Okay, let's talk about mating and competition. With so many species, how do they make sure they find the right partner?
Chemicals are key. Pheromones are crucial for long-distance attraction and making sure you're signaling to the same species. Different groups use totally different chemical signals, like some scarabs use fatty acid derivatives, others use amino acid ones.
Different chemical languages.
Exactly. And of course, fireflies have their unique light shows. Complex flight patterns combined with specific flash sequences, signal species, sex, readiness to mate. It's all coded in the light.
Beyond chemicals and light, there are some amazing mechanical solutions for reproduction. That thistle tortoise beetle example is mind-blowing, like miniature engineering.
It really is a marvel of microscopic hydraulics and material science. The male thistle tortoise beetle has this reproductive organ, the intromittent organ, called a flagellum. And it's incredibly long and thin, like a tube.
Okay.
But the female's reproductive duct is also really long, and it's coiled up like a spring. So the male faces this huge mechanical challenge.
How does he get that thin structure through the coiled tube without it just buckling or bending?
That's the genius of it. The flagellum has to become temporarily rigid enough to navigate that whole coiled tract, but still be flexible enough to be stored inside his body when he's not mating. Researchers found it uses this amazing combination of stiffness and resilience. It actually hardens as it's being inserted.
Wow. And that has implications for us.
Big time. The way that flagellum works, becoming stiff under pressure but staying flexible, it's given engineers ideas for designing better microscopic medical devices.
It's like tiny catheters.
Exactly. Microcatheters that need to navigate complex, delicate pathways inside the human body without kinking or damaging tissue. The beetle solved that problem millions of years ago.
Nature as the ultimate engineer. And finally, physical fights for mates. That explains some of the really dramatic looks, like stag beetles.
Oh, yeah. Sexual dimorphism differences between males and females is really obvious in territorial species. Stag beetles, Hercules beetles, rhinoceros beetles. The males often have these enormous, sometimes totally bizarre-looking mandibles or horns.
Not for eating.
No, purely weapons. They use them in ritualized fights with other males, trying to pry their rivals off branches or flip them over to win access to females or resources.
Okay, we've seen the incredible anatomy and life cycle. Let's get into 3. Behavior, ecology, and survival strategies. How do all these features let them dominate ecosystems?
Well, starting with just getting around locomotion. We talked about the elytra being a bit clunky for takeoff, but some groups found ways around that, like the Cetoninae, the flower chafers, or fruit chafers.
How do they fly differently?
They have modifications along the sides of their elytra. They can keep the main wing cases mostly closed and actually extend their flight wings out laterally underneath the edges of the elytra through little slits.
Ah. So they don't have to lift the whole heavy cover.
Right. It allows for a much smoother, more controlled flight. Better maneuverability, faster takeoff compared to the standard beetle method.
Clever. And going back underwater, the physical gill is amazing, but it's part of a bigger aquatic package, right?
Definitely. The gill handles the gas exchange, but managing that air bubble is crucial too. Those hydrophobic hairs we mentioned are key for trapping and holding the bubble using surface tension. It lets them stay down hunting or feeding for quite a while before that nitrogen issue forces them back up.
A big part of their success has to be that they eat almost everything. Their feeding diversity must be just off the charts.
It's totally exhaustive. Beetles occupy nearly every trophic level imaginable. You have super specialized herbivores, think longhorn beetles boring into wood or weevils attacking specific plants. You've got generalist predators like ground beetles and rove beetles eating other invertebrates. And then there's the cleanup crew.
The detritivores, eating dead stuff.
Absolutely essential. The coprophagous ones eat dung. Neprophagous ones eat carcasses. They are incredibly efficient recyclers in many ecosystems. They find and break down dead organic matter super fast, stopping waste buildup and cycling nutrients back into the soil.
And sometimes they form these really intricate partnerships like the ambrosia beetles and their fungi. That sounds like farming.
It is farming. It's co-evolved agriculture. Ambrosia beetles bore these complex tunnel systems into dead or dying trees, But the key is they carry specific fungal spores with them in little pockets on their bodies called mitochondria.
Like seed packets.
Exactly. And once inside the tunnels, they effectively plant these spores and cultivate fungal gardens.
And the fungi help them digest the wood.
Yeah.
Because wood is hard to eat.
Precisely. Wood is tough to break down, and it often has toxic chemicals. The fungi digest the cellulose and lignin, detoxify it, and concentrate nutrients into their own fungal tissue. That fungus becomes the sole food source for the beetle larvae and adults in the colony. A perfect mutualism.
It's easy to think of beetles as solitary creatures, but you find some really surprising social behavior too, like parental care and even true social structures.
Yeah, while most just lay eggs and leave, the exceptions are fascinating. Burying beetles, Snickerophorus, are probably the best-known example of parental care. A pair finds a small, dead animal, like a mouse.
And they bury it.
They work together, they bury it, clean it by removing fur or feathers, roll it into a neat ball, coat it with antibacterial secretions to slow down decay, and then build a little chamber underground around it.
Wow, that's a lot of work.
And then they lay eggs nearby. Once the larvae hatch, the parents actually feed them regurgitated food from the carcass. They even adjust how much they feed them based on the begging behavior of the larva. It's really intensive care.
That's amazing. And if that's not social enough, you mentioned the ultimate level, eusociality, like ants or bees.
This is the big outlier. Eusociality with cooperative brood care, overlapping generations, and a reproductive division of labor, like queens and workers. You mostly see that in Hymenoptera, ants, bees, wasps, and termites. But there's one known, truly eusocial beetle, the ambrosia weevil, Australplatypus incompertus.
Ambrosia weevil, so it's also a fungus farmer.
Yes, related lifestyle. They live in these extensive, long-lasting tunnel systems inside eucalyptus trees in Australia. A founding female, the queen, starts the colony. But crucially, her daughters stay in the nest.
They don't leave to start their own.
Many don't. They stay, help maintain the fungal gardens, defend the tunnels, and care for the next generation of larvae laid by the queen. These helper females seem to forgo their own reproduction to help the colony thrive. That's the hallmark of eusociality.
A beetle society.
Yeah.
Incredible. Okay, switching to defense survival means avoiding being eaten. Beetles must have a massive toolkit for that. Camouflage and mimicry.
Masters of it. So many species use crypsis blending in, leaf beetles that look like leaves, weevils that look like bird droppings or bits of bark. Then you have Batesian mimicry harmless species imitating dangerous ones. Lots of longhorn beetles look uncannily like wasps, bright colors, jerky movements.
The full predator.
Exactly. But then there's the really dramatic stuff. Aposematism warning colors, bright reds, yellows, oranges on ladybugs or blister beetles. That signals, I taste bad, or I'm toxic.
Right, blister beetles secrete nasty stuff.
They do, but the absolute champion of chemical defense has to be the bombardier beetle.
Ah, yes, the explosive beetle. How does that actually work? It sounds impossible.
It's applied chemistry, basically. They store two chemicals separately in internal glands, hydroquinones and hydrogen peroxide. Think of it like keeping two reactive ingredients apart.
Okay.
When they're threatened, they pump these two liquids into a special thick-walled mixing chamber at the rear end. Then they add enzymes, catalase, and peroxidases. And pretty much, the enzymes instantly trigger a violent exothermic reaction. It generates a lot of heat and gas pressure very, very quickly.
That's why the spray is boiling hot.
Yep. The mixture hits about 100 degrees Celsius boiling point of water, and the pressure blasts this hot, noxious spray out through nozzles they can actually aim quite accurately at whatever's bothering them, often in rapid pulses.
And the beetle itself doesn't get cooked.
The reaction chamber is incredibly tough and heat-resistant. It contains the explosion and directs it outwards. Amazing adaptation.
What about simpler defenses, behavioral stuff?
Oh yeah, lots of that. The classic playing dead thanatosis. Many weevils and other slow beetles, if disturbed, just instantly drop off whatever they're on, tuck in their legs and antennae, and lie perfectly still.
Hoping the predator loses interest.
Exactly. A predator might just see an unmoving, unappetizing little lump and ignore it. Gives the beetle a chance to escape later.
And click beetles, they have that dramatic escape jump.
Right. Beoladridae. They have this unique mechanism. A spine on the underside of their first thoracic segment fits into a groove on the second segment. They can bend their body, building up tension.
Like cucking a trigger?
Sort of. Then they release it suddenly. The spine snaps into the groove with an audible click, releasing the stored energy and launching the beetle several inches into the air. It can use this to escape or just to right itself if it lands on its back.
So versatile. Okay, finally, let's talk about tolerating extremes. especially cold. Some of these survival stories are just breathtaking.
Many beetles cope with cold by entering diapause, basically a programmed hibernation state with lowered metabolism. But the Alaskan beetle Cucujas clavipes penicis, its larva takes cold tolerance to a whole different level.
This is the one that survives being frozen solid, down to like minus 100 Celsius. How is that even possible?
It involves some serious biochemistry. Ice forming inside cells is usually deadly. It physically shreds things. These larvae do two main things. First, they produce antifreeze proteins that inhibit ice crystal growth. Second, they synthesize huge amounts of cryoprotectants.
Like natural antifreeze.
Exactly. Things like glycerol, but also more complex sugar alcohols like xylomannan and 3-tol.
And didn't you mention dehydration?
That's the crucial trick. Before it gets really cold, the larvae deliberately dehydrate themselves, reducing the amount of water in their cells.
Why? Seems counterintuitive.
Because by removing water, they drastically concentrate those cryoprotectant chemicals, the xylomannan and 3-tol. This super concentrated solution lowers the freezing point of the remaining cell fluid so much that it doesn't form sharp ice crystals. Instead, it vitrifies, turns into a glass-like solid state.
So it freezes solid, but without the damaging ice crystals. Surviving minus 100 degrees C. Mind-blowing.
What about the opposite extreme heat? Desert beetles, like tenebrionids, face intense heat. Some can tolerate ground temperatures up to 50 degrees C, 122 degrees Fahrenheit. Others use behavior. Think of those whitish tiger beetles you see on hot sand.
Yeah. What do they do?
They do stilting. They stand up tall on their legs, extending them fully, lifting their body as high off the scorching ground as possible. The ground can be much hotter than the air just above it.
Creates a little air gap, reduces heat absorption. Smart.
Very smart. And then there's the ultimate water collection adaptation from the driest place on Earth, the Namib desert beetle.
Right. Stenocara, the fog catcher.
The fog stand beetle, yeah. Stenocara gracilipes. Lives where it basically never rains. It gets water from the fog that rolls in off the Atlantic. And it does it passively, just using the structure of its back. It's elytra.
Oh, what's special about its back?
The surface is covered in this amazing pattern. It has tiny, smooth, hydrophilic bumps, water-loving bumps, and these bumps are surrounded by waxy, hydrophobic trocks, water-repelling channels.
The water sticks to the bumps, but slides off the rest.
Exactly. The beetle tilts its body up into the morning fog. Tiny fog droplets condense specifically onto those hydrophilic bumps. As the droplets grow bigger, they eventually get heavy enough to overcome the surface tension. And because the surrounding area is waxy and water repellent, the water drop rolls neatly down the channels, straight towards the beetle's mouth.
Passive water harvesting.
Yeah.
Incredible. And that's inspired technology, hasn't it?
Absolutely. It's a prime example of biomimicry.
Yeah. That Namib beetle is the perfect lead-in to our final section. 4. Relationship to humans. Pest, resource, and inspiration. Beetles have been tangled up with human culture, history, and technology for millennia.
Oh, deeply. Their cultural impact goes way back, especially in ancient Egypt with the sacred scarab beetle, Scarabaeus saucer, a type of dung beetle.
Right, they were revered, seen as divine.
Very much so. Linked directly to Khepri, the god of the rising sun. The Egyptians saw the beetle rolling its ball of dung across the sand and connected it to Khepri rolling the sun across the sky each morning.
So scarabs meant rebirth, sunrise.
Rebirth, resurrection, creation. Scarab symbols were everywhere on seals, amulets, jewelry. Hugely important in funerary practices.
And they pop up in Greek and Roman times, too.
Yep. Pliny the Elder wrote about stag beetles, noting their big mandibles. And there's a Greek myth about a guy named Cerambus being turned into a longhorn beetle described as black with hard wings. Though maybe less glamorous, apparently Greek kids sometimes used captured beetles as toys.
Huh. Okay, so ancient respect. But the main modern interaction is often negative, right? Beetles as major pests.
That's a huge part of the story, unfortunately. About 75% of beetle species eat plants, phytophagus, both as larvae and adults. When their tastes overlap with our crops or timber, the economic damage can be immense.
The classic example has to be the boll weevil in the U.S.
Anthonymus grandis. Yeah, that little beetle fundamentally changed the American South. It came up from Mexico around 1892, spread through the cotton belt.
And the larvae eat the cotton.
They feed inside the developing cotton bolls, destroying the fiber. Yields plummeted. Despite massive efforts to control it, it's still considered the most destructive cotton pest in North America. Cost producers something like $13 billion over the years, forced whole regions to diversify away from cotton.
And they hit forests hard, too.
Definitely. Forest pests are a massive ecological and economic problem. Bark beetles transmit the fungus causing Dutch elm disease, wiped out elms across continents. In western North America, the mountain pine beetle has killed millions upon millions of acres of pine forest. Huge impact on timber industries.
And maybe the ultimate pest success story, in a way, is the Colorado potato beetle. Resilient, it doesn't even cover it.
Leptinotarsa disseminata, a master of evolution and fast forward. It eats potatoes, tomatoes, eggplant, loves them.
Yeah.
But the problem is, different populations of this one species have evolved resistance to basically every single major class of insecticide we've ever developed.
Every class.
That's incredible.
It's a constant battle. They adapt so quickly. In fact, their destructive potential was even noticed by military planners. You mean as a weapon?
During World War II, yeah. Both sides apparently considered using the Colorado potato beetle as a form of entomological warfare. The idea was to drop them on enemy crops to cause food shortages. Germany even ran tests, releasing tens of thousands near Frankfurt.
Wow. Weaponized beetles. Okay, but despite the pests, many beetles are incredibly helpful, right? Beneficial allies.
Absolutely crucial. They're vital parts of our agricultural systems. Lady beetles, ladybugs, Coccinellidae, everyone knows them. They're amazing predators of aphids, scale insects, whiteflies. Total biocontrol heroes.
And ground beetles help too.
Yeah, ground beetles munch on pests like wireworms and caterpillars. Some even eat weed seeds, helping farmers that way.
And the economic value of dung beetles.
Yeah.
You mentioned that earlier. It's huge.
Staggering, really. Dung beetles save the U.S. cattle industry an estimated $380 million every year.
How? Just by burying dung.
By burying livestock dung quickly, they stop pest flies like the nasty bush fly from breeding in it. Plus, all that tunneling aerates the soil and cycles nutrients. It's free ecological services on a massive scale. Australia even had a huge project to introduce dung beetles specifically for this reason.
And they have that slightly gruesome but useful role in museums and taxidermy.
Right. The dermestid beetles, or skin beetles. Their larvae are incredibly good at cleaning the flesh off bones. Museums and researchers use colonies of them to prepare skeletons for study or display. They do a perfect, delicate job.
Okay, let's wrap up with the more modern connections. Cultural uses, and especially that boom in technology inspired by beetles, biomedics, and even robotics.
Culturally, they're still used. Beetling art is a thing using those iridescent elytra, which keep their color for ages. In parts of Mexico, people decorate certain large, placid Zophoris beetles and wear them as living jewelry. Their hard shells and slow movement make it possible.
Living brooches. And what about beetle fighting?
Yeah, in places like Thailand, male rhinoceros beetles, xylotroops, are pitted against each other. It's often linked to gambling, exploiting their natural territorial aggression.
But the really cutting-edge stuff is the technological inspiration, moving from just copying to actually integrating, like the Bombardier beetle spray.
Yeah, that controlled, high-pressure chemical mixing and ejection system has directly inspired designs for new types of fine mist spray technologies, especially where you need to mix two components right at the point of delivery.
And the Namib desert beetle, the water collector.
That directly led to prototypes for self-filling water bottles. Mimicking that pattern of water-loving bumps and water-repelling troughs on surfaces allows passive water collection from humid air. Huge potential for arid regions.
And then cyborg insects. That sounds like pure sci-fi.
It's real and developing fast, often funded by defense agencies like DARPA. Scientists have implanted microelectrodes into the flight muscles of large beetles, like Mycinorhina torquata,
To control them.
to remotely steer their flight, control their walking, basically turning them into tiny steerable platforms, maybe for surveillance.
Wow. Direct remote control.
And there's more. They've strapped tiny, ultra-lightweight cameras, like 1/4 of a gram, onto the backs of smaller desert beetles, like Asbolus or Iliotes. These camera backpacks can stream video for hours.
So the beetle becomes a living drone.
Essentially, yeah. For observation in places where normal robots can't easily go, beetles are tough, small, energy efficient, nature's original micro-robots.
But with all this potential, their conservation is a worry, right? Many must be quite vulnerable.
Very much so. Because so many beetles are highly specialized, tied to one type of plant or a specific stage of wood decay or a certain habitat, they're really vulnerable to habitat loss or change. Island species like Halictopleuris undatus in Madagascar are often at high risk.
Long life cycles don't help either, probably.
Exactly. Slow reproduction, specific needs, it makes them fragile. Conservation often relies on using charismatic species, like the big stag beetles, as flagship species to raise public awareness for protecting invertebrate habitats more broadly.
What an absolutely incredible deep dive. We started with that mind-bending statistic, 1 in 4 animals is a beetle, and everything we've covered just backs up that dominance. Their physiology, their behavior, it's just complexity layered on complexity.
They really are the ultimate masters of adaptation, aren't they? They can be a devastating pest, a multi-million-dollar agricultural ally, piece of living art, or the blueprint for our next gadget, all built on that simple yet endlessly versatile armored body plan.
We've seen some truly astonishing mechanisms. The physical gill working because of nitrogen diffusion.
The multi-stage life switch of hypermetamorphosis.
That incredible structural engineering in the thistle tortoise beetle's reproductive organ.
And maybe the pinnacle is that physiological mastery, like in the Alaskan beetle, Cucujas clevipes pernicious, surviving -100 Celsius by basically turning its insides into a type of biological glass, using those special alcohols, xylomen and erythritol, concentrated through deliberate dehydration.
That level of biochemical control over freezing, it almost doesn't seem real. It really makes you wonder, with estimates maybe 1 to 2 million undiscovered beetle species still out there.
Exactly. When you think about that vast hidden biodiversity, how many more biochemical marvels, physiological tricks, are still locked away inside this one order of animals?
What secrets of resilience or chemistry or longevity are waiting in the next million beetles we haven't even found yet?
What inspirations for new materials, new medicines, new engineering solutions are we still completely missing just because we haven't looked closely enough at the most successful group of animals on Earth?
It really seems the more we learn, the more profound Haldane's observation becomes. If you want to understand biological success, adaptation, survival, you really do need to appreciate that inordinate fondness for beetles.
Welcome back to The Deep Dive, the place where we really try to cut through the noise. We take these dense reports, academic papers, government documents, and boil it all down to what you actually need to know.
And today, we're tackling a really big one, something you hear thrown around all the time: tax havens. It's loaded, politically charged, often really misunderstood.
Yeah, the news cycle loves the term, but the reality underneath, the mechanics, the history, how big this really is, it's way more complex and honestly kind of fascinating when you dig in.
So our mission today is to get past the headlines, past the rhetoric, and look at the facts. What are these places, really? How did they change over time? How much money are we actually talking about? We've synthesized a lot of research here.
Okay, so where do we even start? Definition, I guess, because everyone thinks they know what a tax haven is.
Exactly. And the common idea is, a place with super low, maybe zero, taxes set up for outsiders, for non-residents. But the first big thing to grasp is that definition. It's changed radically.
Right, because if you look back, say, 30, 40 years ago, the defining feature wasn't just low tax.
No, not at all. It was all about secrecy, financial secrecy, hiding your money from the tax man back home. That was the core business model.
But that's largely gone now, hasn't it? Or at least significantly reduced.
It really has, yeah.
Huh.
Legislation has caught up. You had the U.S. bring in FANCIA, that's the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act back in 2010. And then most of the world signed up to the OECD's Common Reporting Standard, CRS, around 2014. Basically, these forced banks everywhere to automatically share info about foreign account holders with their home tax authorities.
Okay, so if the old school secrecy model for individual tax evasion is mostly shut down, what makes something a tax haven now?
It's shifted almost entirely. It's not about hiding anymore. It's about the effective tax rate. And that's a key distinction.
Effective versus headline rate. Explain that.
Sure. A country might have an official or headline corporate tax rate of, say, 15%, maybe even 20%. Looks normal on paper. But the effective rate, what a giant multinational actually pays on its global profits routed through there, can be almost zero.
How?
Through incredibly complex, perfectly legal, state-approved structures and laws designed specifically for this purpose. It's not a legal evasion, it's legal tax avoidance baked into the system.
And this shift explains that weird paradox you see, right? Where countries we know have strong bank secrecy laws, like parts of the U.S. or Germany, they don't usually end up on the political tax haven list.
Exactly, because their headline corporate rates are relatively high, so politically they get a pass. But then you look at countries like Ireland, they're fully compliant, they share data, they tick all the transparency boxes.
Right, but they do show up on lists.
Frequently.
Yeah.
because their effective rates for multinationals achieved through those sophisticated legal tools are incredibly low. That's what matters now.
So, for practical purposes, the academics studying this stuff, they basically treat tax haven and offshore financial center, OFC, as the same thing now.
Pretty much, yeah. They're functionally synonymous in the modern research. The focus isn't individuals hiding bags of cash anymore. It's about corporations legally rerouting billions, trillions, using these complex base erosion and profit-shifting tools, BEPS.
BEPS. Okay, we'll need to unpack that. But first, how did we even get here? This complex global system didn't just appear overnight.
No, definitely not. I mean, tax dodging is probably as old as taxes themselves. You find loopholes mentioned in ancient Greece. But the modern industrial-scale tax haven, that's really a 20th century thing.
Driven by.
Primarily, the sky-high taxes needed to fund the world wars. Especially after World War I, tax rates shot up in major economies, and that created a huge incentive to find ways around them.
And interestingly, the seed wasn't planted on some sunny island, was it? It was closer to home, at least for U.S. listeners.
That's right. Late 19th century, New Jersey of all places in the 1880s, and then Delaware, crucially, in 1898. They weren't tax havens in the zero-tax sense yet.
But they did something new.
They pioneered incredibly liberal rules for setting up corporations, made it super easy, minimal disclosure, minimal fuss. The whole idea of an off-the-shelf company really took root there. They offered legal certainty and speed.
So they created the template, a government using corporate law as an economic strategy.
Exactly. And that template, using legal flexibility to attract business, was copied and adapted by others later, specifically for tax advantages, once those post-WWI tax rates bit hard.
Okay, so post-WWI, who jumps on this first?
The academics point to the Zurich-Zug-Liechtenstein triangle, mid-1920s. That's seen as the first real tax haven hub. Liechtenstein in particular came up at the Anstalt.
What's that?
It's a unique legal entity, sort of a foundation, designed specifically to hold assets with a very high degree of anonymity and flexibility. Very useful for sheltering wealth.
So Europe's going down the path of special legal structures and, later, secrecy. What about the British Empire? They took a different route.
They did, based on a court case, the Egyptian Delta Land case in 1929. This is absolutely fundamental to the whole British offshore world.
What did the court decide?
The English courts ruled that a company registered in Britain wasn't liable for British tax if its central management and control happened somewhere else, outside Britain.
Wow, so you could register a UK company but run it from abroad and pay no UK tax?
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
It created the whole concept of the non-resident corporation. Overnight, Britain itself became a kind of tax haven for these specific types of companies.
And crucially, that ruling applied across the empire.
Yes, that was the key. All the British dependencies and colonies, places like Bermuda, the Cayman Islands, could immediately use this.
Yeah.
They could set up companies under familiar British law, manage them from elsewhere, and tax them at 0% locally. That's the foundation for many Caribbean havens.
Okay, so by the 1930s, you've got the European model, special structures, secrecy, and the British model, non-resident companies, imperial network. And then Switzerland doubles down on secrecy.
Right. The Swiss Banking Act of 1934. This wasn't just custom. It made breaking bank secrecy a criminal offense. That turned secrecy into a guaranteed, legally protected product. Made Switzerland the gold standard for hiding private wealth for decades.
Fast forward to after World War II, things get even more complex with currency controls.
Yeah, post-war, many countries restricted how currency could move across borders. But this inadvertently created a massive tool of U.S. dollars held outside the U.S., mainly in Europe, the Eurodollar market.
And this needed somewhere to operate.
Exactly. It needed places free from U.S. regulations and ideally low tax. This fueled the explosive growth of offshore financial centers, OFCs. The Caymans, Hong Kong, Singapore really took off then.
And London played a role too.
A crucial one. London basically facilitated this Eurodollar market. In 1957, they made a key ruling that certain transactions between non-UK entities, even if handled by London banks, weren't technically considered in the UK for tax or regulatory purposes. Helped keep London at the center of global finance while the offshore world boomed.
It's amazing how the big financial centers often enable the havens. So by the 80s, we see another shift. Less about hiding cash, more about corporate strategy.
Absolutely pivotal shift. This is the rise of the corporate-focused tax havens. Think Ireland, the Netherlands, Singapore again. These aren't shadowy places anymore.
They're OECD members,
Yeah.
EU members.
Totally compliant on paper. High transparency standards, often high headline tax rates, but their real product is sophisticated, legislated base erosion, and profit-shifting BEPS tools. They offer legal ways for multinationals to engineer near-zero effective tax rates.
So it's a journey from just low tax to secrecy to this incredibly complex legalistic system, hiding money in a vault versus rerouting intellectual property through multi-layered contracts.
That's the evolution. And understanding that is key to understanding the modern landscape.
Which brings us to how researchers actually map this stuff today. They're not relying on political labels anymore.
No, the serious academic work, people like James Hines, Gabriel Zucman, they ignore the politics and just follow the money. They use quantitative analysis of global financial and corporate flows. Where does value originate? Where does it move? Where does it end up?
And the most influential model for this is the conduit and sink framework from CorpNet in 2017.
Yes, that's become the standard way to categorize these places based on the data. It divides them into two types. First, you have the sink OFCs.
Sinks sounds like where things disappear.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
They are the endpoints, jurisdictions where a disproportionate amount of value flows in and then effectively vanishes from the global economic system, at least for tax purposes.
Characteristic.
Typically explicit 0% tax rates. Very little real economic activity compared to the massive financial flows passing through. And usually, they have relatively few bilateral tax treaties because they don't need them to facilitate complex avoidance structures. They're just the final stop.
And the classic examples are?
The British Virgin Islands, BVI, the Cayman Islands, Bermuda. Those are the big sinks.
Yeah.
Low tax, historically high secrecy, where the profits finally land untaxed.
Okay, so that's the sinks. What about the conduit OFCs?
The conduits are the crucial pipelines. They're the jurisdictions through which huge amounts of value flow on their way to the sinks.
So they're not the final destination?
No, they're the intermediaries, the facilitators, and crucially, they look very different from sinks. They usually have high headline tax rates, they're highly compliant with OECD standards, transparent.
But they offer the BEPS tools.
Exactly. They have the complex legal infrastructure, the specialized corporate vehicles, and this is vital. They have extensive networks of bilateral tax treaties. They need those treaties to legally justify moving profits across borders without triggering withholding taxes elsewhere.
So the conduits are these sophisticated, high-compliance hubs using treaty networks to channel money towards the zero-tax sinks.
Precisely. And the major conduits that consistently pop up in the quantitative studies are the Netherlands, Ireland, Switzerland, and Singapore. Big reputable economies, often OECD EU members.
And when you combine the main conduits and the main sinks, you get a pretty consistent list of the world's biggest players in this game.
Remarkably consistent across the major studies. Hines, CorpNet, Zucman. You see the same core group of 9 names again and again.
Let's hear them.
Okay, the big ones are Ireland, Singapore, Switzerland, the Netherlands, Luxembourg. Those are primarily the conduits or have very advanced systems. And then the major sinks, the Cayman Islands, the British Virgin Islands, Hong Kong, and Bermuda. Those 9 dominate global corporate profit shifting.
And this is where that political disconnect just slaps you in the face. You have this clear, data-driven list from academics, and then you look at the official lists from governments, like the EU blacklist or the early OECD lists.
Completely different beasts. When the OECD put out its first list in 2000, it named 35 jurisdictions. 0 OECD members among them, even though places like Switzerland and Luxembourg were already major players.
And the EU blacklist from 2017?
Same story. It explicitly avoids listing any EU member state or even OECD members generally.
So how do Ireland and the Netherlands, which the data clearly shows are massive conduits, avoid ending up on, say, the EU's own list? It seems absurd.
Because they meet the EU's political criteria for the list. Those criteria focus mainly on tax transparency, information exchange, and not having harmful preferential tax regimes in a very narrow sense. The big conduits are masters of compliance on those fronts.
They tick the box.
They tick the boxes. Their systems, while resulting in near-zero effective tax, are complex, legal, and embedded in their standard tax code, not some secret side deal. They're not non-cooperative by the official definition. It drove EU Commissioner Moscovici crazy, he called places like Ireland and the Netherlands tax black holes within the EU. But politically, the blacklist couldn't touch them. They've kind of weaponized compliance.
Okay, let's talk scale. Because understanding the conduit sync network is one thing, but grasping the sheer amount of money involved, that's the real shocker.
It really is. Quantifying it is tough, obviously, because it's designed to be opaque. But researchers like Zucman have made huge strides using things like anomalies in national accounts data.
So the big number first. How much capital, globally, is estimated to be held offshore in these havens? The total stock.
The most credible estimates, synthesizing different approaches, put the figures somewhere between 7 and 10 trillion US dollars.
7 to 10 trillion.
Trillion, yeah.
Right.
Just let that sink in. That's maybe up to 10% of the world's total household financial wealth, plus corporate assets parked offshore.
A tenth of global financial assets sitting outside the normal tax net. That's mind-boggling. Okay, what about the flow, the annual loss? How much tax revenue are governments losing every year because of this?
Again, estimates vary, but the consensus range is somewhere between 100 billion and 250 billion US dollars per year. Zuckman's work suggests corporate profit shifting alone costs governments well over $250 billion annually now.
And that hits developing countries hardest, right?
Disproportionately. They rely more heavily on corporate taxes, and they desperately need that revenue for basic services infrastructure. It's a huge drain for them.
So how is this actually done? How do these trillions get shifted? We keep mentioning BEPS, base erosion, and profit shifting. Let's get into the mechanics. How does a multinational with a 25% tax rate somewhere end up paying almost nothing via haven?
The number one tool, the engine of modern BEPS, according to basically all the sources, is intellectual property. IP accounting, patents, brand names, software code, algorithms.
Intangible assets.
Exactly. Intangibles are perfect for this because their value is subjective, and they're easy to move legally across borders. It's called the leading corporate tax avoidance vehicle.
Okay, walk us through a typical IP shifting scheme, step by step.
Right. So step one, big multinational Inc. develops some valuable IP, maybe new drug formula, maybe killer software code in its home country, let's say the US or Germany. Costs them, say, $1 billion to develop.
Okay.
Step two, they sell or legally transfer the ownership of that IP to a subsidiary they've set up in a low-tax conduit haven, like Ireland or the Netherlands. Just a paper transaction moving the legal title.
Why?
Because, step three, once the IP is legally domiciled in the haven subsidiary, its value gets magically reassessed. It's no longer valued at the $1 billion development cost. No, now it's valued based on the massive future profits it's expected to generate globally. So suddenly, on paper, it's worth maybe $100 billion.
100 times more. How is that legal?
Transfer pricing rules are complex, and multinationals employ armies of lawyers and accountants to justify these valuations based on projected future income streams. It's aggressive, but often technically legal under existing rules.
Okay, so the Irish subsidiary now owns IT worth $100 billion. What next?
Step four. That Irish subsidiary now charges enormous royalty fees, license payments, brand usage fees back to all the other operating companies in the multinational group around the world, including the original parent company back in the US or Germany.
I see. So the German company, which is making the actual product, now has to pay massive fees to its own Irish subsidiary for the right to use the IP it originally developed.
Exactly. And those huge royalty payments are treated as a tax-deductible business expense in Germany. So it erodes the tax base in Germany, less profit to tax there.
And the profit shows up where?
It shifts legally to the Irish subsidiary that owns the IP. And since the effective tax rate in Ireland on this type of income is designed to be near zero, poof, the profit is shielded from tax.
That's the core mechanism. And these structures got incredibly complex, right? Like the double Irish with a Dutch sandwich.
Infamous, yeah. That specific structure involved using 2 Irish companies and 1 Dutch company in a chain to exploit loopholes in both Irish and U.S. tax law, plus tax treaties. It was phenomenally effective. Estimates suggest it shielded over $100 billion in just U.S. corporate profits by around 2015 before it was finally phased out.
And all this paper shuffling, these massive royalty flows, they must massively distort the economies of the havens themselves.
Oh, absolutely. It creates bizarre statistical anomalies. All these billions or trillions in royalties and IP values flowing through a haven get added to its gross domestic product, its GDP.
Even though the money isn't really staying there or being taxed there?
Right. It inflates their headline economic figures enormously. That's why you constantly see small countries like Luxembourg, Singapore, Ireland, right at the top of global GDP per capita rankings, way above huge industrial economies. It's largely phantom GDP generated by these BEPS flows.
And this led to that incredible story out of Ireland, leprechaun economics.
Yes, Paul Krugman coined that term. In the first quarter of 2015, Apple did a massive internal restructuring, shifting the legal ownership of hundreds of billions of dollars worth of its global IP assets to its Irish subsidiaries.
What did that do to Ireland's stats?
The statistical impact was so huge, so sudden, it caused Ireland's official GDP figure for that year to jump by an unbelievable 26% in 1 year.
26%, that's insane. It makes the number meaningless.
Totally meaningless for understanding the real Irish economy. The distortion was so bad, the Irish Central Statistics Office basically had to admit defeat. They stopped emphasizing traditional GDP and GNP.
And they created a new metric.
They did. They introduced GNI modified gross national income. It's specifically designed to strip out the distorting effects of this globalization stuff. The profits from relocated IP, the depreciation on planes owned by Ireland's huge aircraft leasing sector, things like that. It's a much more realistic picture. It's a stark example of how BEPS activity can literally break standard economic metrics.
It really highlights the scale. Okay, so given this massive outflow, particularly from U.S. companies, you'd think the U.S. would be leading the global fight against havens. But the reality is more complicated.
It's extremely complicated, paradoxical even. On one hand, the research is clear. U.S. multinationals are the biggest users of tax havens, responsible for maybe almost half of all the corporate profits shifted globally.
So why wasn't the U.S. government cracking down harder for decades?
It goes back to this really influential, maybe counterintuitive finding from a 1994 paper by Hines and Rice. They argued that under the old U.S. tax system, allowing U.S. companies to pay low taxes abroad could actually increase U.S. tax revenue in the long run.
How does that work? Low foreign tax means more U.S. tax.
Okay, quick explanation of the old system. The U.S. used a worldwide tax system, meaning U.S. companies owed U.S. tax on all their profits, wherever earned. But to avoid double taxing, they got a credit for taxes already paid to foreign governments.
Right.
The catch was they only pay the U.S. tax on foreign profits when they actually brought the money home, repatriated it. So companies had a huge incentive to leave profits offshore indefinitely.
Okay, still following. How do havens fit in?
Well, imagine a U.S. company earning profits in Germany, paying a 30% German tax. It builds up a big chunk of foreign tax credits. When it finally brings that money back to the U.S., those credits wipe out most or all of the U.S. tax due.
Got it.
Now, contrast that with using a haven. The U.S. company shifts profits to, say, Bermuda, pays 0% tax there. It builds up zero foreign tax credits. If and when that money eventually comes back to the U.S., maybe years later, maybe due to a tax holiday, the U.S. Treasury gets the full U.S. tax rate on it because there are no credits to offset it.
So minimizing foreign tax payments maximize the potential future U.S. tax take.
That was the Hines-Rice argument. And it was influential. It arguably contributed to U.S. policies that made BPS easier, like the 1996 check-the-box rules, which simplified creating foreign subsidiaries used in these schemes. The thinking was, let our companies win the global tax game, hurt other countries' tax bases, because eventually that money might flow back to the U.S. Treasury.
A very strategic, if perhaps globally uncooperative view.
You could say that. And then there's the U.S. itself. It's weird. It ranks high on secrecy indexes. Think Delaware, Wyoming, Nevada, creating anonymous shell companies, making the U.S. a haven for foreign money seeking secrecy.
But it's not considered a corporate tax haven in the same way.
Not by the main academic measures of BEPS flows, no. Because you don't really see major foreign companies moving their headquarters to the U.S. just to pull off tax avoidance schemes using U.S. structures. The U.S. system wasn't designed for that kind of inbound corporate haven activity, even if it facilitates outbound avoidance and inbound secrecy.
Okay, so the U.S. role is complex. Facilitator of outbound BEPS, haven for inbound secrecy, but not quite a conduit or sink itself for foreign corporations. Yet the U.S. did spearhead the biggest attack on individual tax evasion.
Absolutely. That was ESEA in 2010, pure U.S. unilateralism. It basically told every bank, broker, and fund in the world, either you report all accounts held by U.S. persons directly to the IRS, or
what?
Or we slap a 30% withholding tax on any payment flowing from the U.S. to you. Essentially comply or be cut off from the U.S. financial system.
And did it work? Did foreign banks comply?
Overwhelmingly, yes. No major global bank could afford to be frozen out of U.S. dollar transactions. It proved that when the U.S. flexes its financial muscle, it can force global change, at least on certain issues. Coercion worked.
And the rest of the world kind of scrambled to catch up, leading to the OECD's Common Reporting Standard, CRS.
Exactly. CRS, launched in 2014, is essentially the multilateral reciprocal version of FATSIA. Over 100 countries, including former secrecy strongholds, agreed to automatically exchange financial account information every year. It was a massive step towards ending bank secrecy for individual tax evasion.
But crucially, HCN and CRS didn't really stop the big corporate BEPS schemes using IP and complex structures.
Largely no. They targeted hidden bank accounts, not the legal profit-shifting structures used by multinationals. And some corporate secrecy tools still exist.
Like those Irish and limited liability companies you mentioned, ULLs.
Right. The ULLs is specific company type in Ireland and a few other places. Unlike a normal limited company, they generally don't have to file public financial accounts. This lack of transparency makes it harder for tax authorities elsewhere to see exactly how money is moving inside a multinational group using Ireland as a conduit. It obscures the mechanics of the BEPS.
Okay, so transparency efforts had limits. What about direct legislative attacks on specific avoidance tactics, like inversions?
Yeah, inversions became a big political issue. That's when a U.S. company, say, buys a smaller foreign company in a low-tax country like Ireland, and then legally moves its headquarters there on paper to escape U.S. taxes.
We saw a wave of those, particularly in pharma.
We did. Congress tried to stop naked inversions, ones with no real business purpose, back in 2004. But the big merger inversions continued. What really stopped them, or at least the biggest ones, wasn't Congress, but the U.S. Treasury Department issuing stricter and stricter regulations between 2014 and 2016.
Making them less attractive.
Making the tax benefits much harder to actually achieve. These regulations effectively killed the massive $160 billion Pfizer-Allergan deal in 2016, where Pfizer planned to invert to Ireland. That sent a powerful signal.
Okay, so that dealt with one specific tactic. What about the broader international effort, the OECD's BEPS project, and the multilateral instrument, MLI? That sounded ambitious.
It was ambitious. The MLI, finalized in 2016, aimed to update thousands of bilateral tax treaties all at once to close common BEPS loopholes. The idea was a coordinated global fix.
But the reception was mixed.
It was widely criticized as being watered down. The big problem was flexibility. Countries could choose which parts of the MLI they wanted to adopt, lots of opt-outs, and guess what?
The Havens opted out of the important bits.
Many key jurisdictions, especially those functioning as conduits or sinks, skillfully used the opt-outs to avoid implementing the most impactful anti-BEPS measures. So its overall effectiveness was significantly blunted.
And the U.S. never even signed the MLI.
Nope, still hasn't. Again, reinforcing that paradox. The U.S. will act unilaterally against individual evasion, FTS, but balks at multilateral agreements that might restrict its own corporation's global tax planning flexibility.
So if multilateral fixes proved weak, did some countries just decide to change their own systems fundamentally?
That became the next strategic move. If you can't beat them, join them, maybe, or at least compete better. The UK did a major overhaul between 2009 and 2012.
What did they do?
Slashed their headline corporate tax rates significantly. Switched from a worldwide system to a territorial system, basically only taxing profits earned in the UK. And they introduced things like a patent box regime, offering lower tax rates on income from UK-based IP.
Trying to become more attractive than the traditional havens.
Exactly. Trying to stop the outflow of UK companies and maybe even attract some back. And it had some success in reversing corporate HQs leaving.
And the U.S. followed with a massive change in 2017, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, TCJA.
Huge change. TCJA dropped the U.S. corporate rate from 35% down to 21%, and it formally moved the U.S. away from that old worldwide system with deferral to a new hybrid territorial system.
And the impact on using havens.
It dramatically reduced the incentive. Remember the Heinz-Rice logic?
Yeah.
Paying zero tax abroad was valuable, mainly because the U.S. rate was so high, and repatriation triggered that high rate eventually. By slashing the U.S. rate and changing the system, the potential tax savings from using complex, costly BEPS schemes through havens became much, much smaller. It simply wasn't worth the hassle for many U.S. firms anymore.
So lowering the domestic rate was, ironically, one of the most effective anti-haven measures for the U.S.
In many ways, yes. It changed the game theory.
One last factor we have to mention is the impact of those massive data leaks. Panama Papers, Paradise Papers, Pandora Papers.
Absolutely critical. These weren't legislative changes, they were illegal breaches. But the sheer volume of data, 2.6 terabytes in the Panama Papers alone, and the high-profile names exposed, global leaders, celebrities, huge corporations, it completely changed the public conversation.
Took it from a technical tax issue to a mainstream scandal.
Exactly. It put immense political pressure on governments worldwide by revealing the scale and the mechanisms of the offshore world in undeniable detail. Made it much harder to ignore.
Okay, we have covered a lot of ground. Let's try to synthesize the key takeaways.
All right, first, the definition game changed. Forget just secrecy. Modern tax havens, especially the corporate ones, are defined by legislation that creates ultra-low effective tax rates, even if headline rates look normal.
Second, the conduit and sink model gives us the map. You've got the sophisticated pipelines, Netherlands, Ireland, Switzerland, Singapore, channeling money through complex legal structures and treaty networks.
Towards the zero-tax endpoints, the BDI, Caymans, Bermuda, where the value ultimately settles untaxed, that network is key.
And third, the scale is just immense. We're talking potentially $7–10 trillion in sheltered wealth, hundreds of billions lost in tax revenue annually, driven largely by these IP-based BEPS schemes. Schemes so large they broke Ireland's GDP calculation, leading to leprechaun economics and the GNI metric.
Which brings us back to that fundamental debate. Are these places parasites, sucking revenue and driving inequality, as Zuckman argues? Or is there any truth to the counter-argument that they act as symbionts, keeping high-tax countries honest and promoting capital flow, as researchers like Rose and Spiegel have sometimes suggested?
It's a deep disagreement, and it makes finding a truly global solution incredibly difficult. Which leads us to the final provocative thought, the latest big idea for reform.
All right, this is the G20 OECD's BEPS 2.0 initiative. It's a two-pillar plan, but the really radical part, Pillar 1, aims to change the very basis of where multinationals pay tax. At least for the biggest ones, over 20 billion euros turnover, over 10% profit margin.
How would it change it? Away from taxing where the IP is legally parked.
Exactly. It proposes shifting a portion of their global profits to be taxed, not where the value is legally created on paper, like in the Irish subsidiary owning the IP, but where the company's actual customers are, where the products are consumed, where the sales revenue is generated.
So tax the sales location, not the IP location.
That's the revolutionary idea, taxing market jurisdictions. It tries to cut the Gordian knot of transfer pricing and IP location games by saying a chunk of your profit belongs where you actually sell your stuff.
That would be the biggest change to international tax rules since they were first set up after World War I, over a century ago. It directly attacks the core incentive for BEPS.
Yeah, it does. It aims to realign taxing rights with real economic activity, with consumption. So the big question we leave you with is this. We saw how legal and financial ingenuity created the incredibly complex BEPS system, the double Irish, the leprechaun economics of the 20th and early 21st centuries. If this new system taxing consumption actually gets implemented,
Will it finally work? Will it shut down large-scale profit shifting?
or will the global network of financial engineers, lawyers, accountants, and complicit jurisdictions simply find new loopholes, new blind spots, new ways to game the system? Will the conduits and sinks just morph into something else? That's the multi-trillion-dollar question for the next era of global finance. Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine a world orbiting Saturn, cloaked in this perpetual orange haze, a place where it rains liquid natural gas, and the seas, well, they're made of ethane and methane.
Yeah, it sounds like science fiction, doesn't it? But this is Titan, Saturn's largest moon.
And our sources, they're calling it a planet-like moon. Which feels right. It seems to be the most chemically complex satellite in the whole solar system.
It really is. And what's fascinating, I think, is how long this really mysterious body just remained hidden from us, shrouded in ignorance, you could say. I mean, It was discovered way back in 1655. Christian Huygens, the Dutch astronomer.
1655.
Yeah, and for 3 centuries, we knew it was there, but that dense veil, it meant we had basically no idea what lay underneath. It's always kind of defied easy categorization because it's just so fundamentally different from every other moon out there.
And it has these two huge solar sister distinctions, right, that immediately set it apart.
Exactly. What are they?
Well, first, it's the only moon we know of that has a dense, really substantial atmosphere. And not just any atmosphere. The surface pressure is actually higher than Earth's, about 1.45 times.
That's incredible. So you could, like, walk around without a pressure suit, theoretically.
Theoretically, yeah. The pressure itself would be fine. You definitely need some serious protection from the cold, obviously. But pressure-wise, it's surprisingly comfortable.
Okay, wow. And the second distinction?
That's the one that really hammers home the planet-like idea. Titan is the only known object in the solar system, besides our own Earth, that has clear, stable bodies of surface liquid.
Right. And we're not talking about, temporary puddles or just ice. We mean vast seas and lakes, proper liquid.
Liquid methane and ethane.
Yeah.
And they have this whole cycle, like our water cycle, just colder, much colder.
Absolutely. A whole hydrological cycle, but with hydrocarbons.
And just to give everyone a sense of scale, Titan is enormous for a moon. It's 50% larger in diameter than our moon and 80% more massive.
And intriguingly, it's actually bigger across than the planet Mercury.
Yeah, I saw that. Titan's diameter is about 5,149 kilometers.
Yeah.
Mercury is, what, 4,879?
Exactly. But here's the twist. Despite being bigger, Titan is only about 40% as massive as Mercury.
Okay, so less dense.
Much less dense. And that difference is really crucial for understanding what's going on inside. Mercury is mostly dense iron and rock. Titan, though, it's a big mix of rock and huge amounts of water ice, which is way less dense.
That ice is key to the geology, right?
Yeah.
And maybe even the internal structure we're going to talk about.
Precisely. It allows for all this incredible complexity.
So our mission today, using the data from Cassini-Huygens and all the research since, is to finally try and penetrate that thick orange haze, explore the really alien geology underneath, and maybe dive into the possibilities for life, exotic life even.
Yeah, on the sort of cryogenic cousin of Earth. It's a fascinating place.
Okay, so let's start with that most obvious feature, the atmosphere, this thick opaque shroud. It stretches, what, 100 to 200 kilometers high?
Something like that, yeah. And it's the main reason Titan was such a mystery for centuries. Before the Voyager missions back in the 80s, astronomers actually thought Titan was even bigger than it is.
Why was that?
Because they were measuring the top of the haze layer, not the actual solid surface hidden beneath it.
Yeah.
The haze made it look larger.
Ah, okay. That makes sense. So it wasn't really until Cassini-Huygens arrived in 2004 that we started to sort of peel back those layers.
Exactly. That's when we really began to understand the composition. The air itself is, well, it's alien, but the main component is strangely familiar.
Which is?
Nitrogen, N2. Makes up about 98.6% of the stratosphere.
Just like Earth, basically. Nitrogen's our main gas, too.
Right. But that's kind of where the similarity ends. The next most abundant gas is methane, CH4, about 4.9%, almost 5% near the surface.
And methane. That's the key ingredient, isn't it? For everything that makes Titan weird and wonderful and also hides the surface.
It is. The problem, or maybe the engine, is the sun's ultraviolet light. It hits the methane high up in the atmosphere.
And breaks it down.
Breaks it down. And then those fragments rapidly recombine into heavier, more complex stuff. Things like ethane, acetylene, propane. And this whole process creates that thick orange photochemical smog we call tholins.
Tholins. Okay, I've heard that term. So they're like complex organic molecules.
Exactly. Heavy organonitrogen molecules. Think of them as long chains built from carbon, hydrogen, and crucially nitrogen. These heavy molecules form aerosols, like tiny particles.
And they just rain down constantly.
Perpetually raining down onto the surface, yeah. Creating that dense, opaque shroud that basically kept us in the dark for so long.
Okay, so that brings us to what the sources call the methane problem, which sounds intriguing.
It's one of the biggest geophysical puzzles out there. Basically, scientists calculated how fast the sun's energy should be destroying that atmospheric methane.
The photochemical destruction rate.
Right. And they figured out that all the methane currently in the atmosphere should have been converted into these heavier tholins within about 50 million years.
50 million. That's, geologically speaking, it's nothing, right?
Yeah.
The solar system's 4.5 billion years old.
Exactly. It's a blink of an eye. So if methane is being destroyed that quickly, the question is, why is there still so much of it?
Yeah, good question. It should have run out ages ago.
Its continued presence pretty much proves it has to be continuously replenished. There must be an internal source feeding methane into the atmosphere.
And the leading idea for that source is?
Active, ongoing cryovolcanism, ice volcanoes, essentially. We need a steady supply of fresh methane coming up from inside Titan to keep the atmosphere topped up.
Okay, need to clarify cryovolcanism. We're not talking about volcanoes spewing molten rock like here on Earth.
No, not at all. Cryo means cold, ice. So on Titan, the stuff erupting isn't scorching magma. It's likely a volatile mix liquid water, probably with ammonia mixed in, and methane itself.
And this slushy mix gets forced up from the interior through cracks in the ice crust.
That's the idea. It erupts onto the surface, releases gases like methane, replenishing the atmosphere. So the very fact that Titan has this thick atmosphere with its specific chemical balance is probably the strongest indirect evidence we have for continuous active geology happening right now.
That internal activity seems crucial, especially when you look at the climate, because there's a kind of paradox there, isn't there?
There is. The surface is incredibly cold, bone-chillingly cold, 94 Kelvin. That's minus 179 Celsius or minus 290 Fahrenheit. Just unbelievably frigid.
And Titan gets hardly any sunlight compared to us. Only about 1% of what Earth receives.
Right, and here's the really weird part about the energy balance. About 90% of that tiny amount of sunlight that does arrive gets absorbed by the atmosphere and the haze before it even hits the ground.
Wow. So hardly any sunlight actually reaches the surface.
Very little. The thermal balance is unique. It's bizarre. The methane gas does provide some greenhouse effect, trapping heat and warming the surface a bit, like greenhouse gases do here. But that thick haze, the tholins we talked about, creates an opposing and much stronger anti-greenhouse effect. It acts like a giant solar umbrella, absorbing most of the incoming sunlight high up.
So the haze actually cools the surface.
Exactly. It keeps the surface significantly colder than the upper atmosphere. It's this weird, delicate balancing act that stabilizes the climate at these cryogenic temperatures. And that stability is what allows liquid methane and ethane to exude on the surface.
And that leads to the methane cycle, which is maybe the most Earth-like thing about Titan, even though it uses completely different stuff.
Absolutely. Because it's so cold, methane and ethane basically take on the role that water plays here. Titan has seasons driven by its orbit around Saturn, and these seasons drive weather patterns: wind, rain.
Methane rain.
Methane rain, yeah. Maybe ethane, too. This leads to erosion, carving out river channels, filling up lakes and seas. It's a fully functioning hydrological cycle.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. A whole weather system based on hydrocarbons. You've got methane rivers carving channels into water-ice bedrock.
Depositing organic sediments, feeding into huge lakes.
It's mind-bending. And even though the sources say the process is probably very slow because of the extreme cold,
it's still potent enough to shape the entire landscape over geological time.
okay, so let's dig down literally. To understand the surface, we need to look beneath it first, at the internal structure.
Yeah, because Titan seems to be hiding a truly Earth-like secret deep inside. We think Titan is differentiated, meaning it has distinct layers.
Like Earth has a core, mantle, crust.
Similar idea. Titan likely has a large, dense, rocky center, a core, maybe 3,400 kilometers in radius, surrounded by multiple thick layers of ice. Different kinds of ice under different pressures.
But the really exciting part is the hint of liquid water, isn't it? A subsurface ocean.
Exactly. There's powerful, though still indirect, evidence suggesting Titan has a subsurface layer of liquid water, probably mixed with ammonia, which acts like antifreeze.
And this ocean would be sandwiched between the outer ice crust and deeper, high-pressure ice layers.
That's the model, which would mean the outer crust is essentially decoupled, floating on this liquid layer, separate from the deep interior.
How do we know that? What's the evidence?
Well, there are two main lines of evidence from the Cassini mission, and they're pretty compelling. First, the orbiter detected these natural, extremely low-frequency radio waves, and they found these waves were reflecting off something deep inside Titan. Now, the ice crust itself isn't a great reflector for these specific waves, but a boundary with a conducting liquid, like salty or ammonia-rich water, would be.
So the reflections suggest a deep liquid layer beneath the ice.
Strongly suggest it, yes. Yeah. And the second piece of evidence is maybe even more dramatic. Researchers tracked surface features, specific landmarks like ridges, canyons, very precisely over a couple of years between 2005 and 2007.
Right.
And they found these features were systematically shifting, moving across Titan's face by up to 30 kilometers.
30 kilometers, that's huge.
It's a massive displacement. The best explanation is that the rigid, icy outer shell must be floating on top of a global liquid layer that's subsurface ocean.
So the crust can sort of slide around independently of the core's rotation.
Exactly. It gets inertially decoupled. It's really powerful confirmation, maybe as close to definitive as we can get without drilling, that there's a massive hidden ocean of liquid water and ammonia down there, shielded from the surface cold.
Okay, moving back up to the surface itself, the geology. It's described as geologically young.
Yeah, remarkably young. Estimated somewhere between maybe 100 million and a billion years old.
Which, again, compared to the solar system's age, is very recent.
Very. It implies that geological processes are constantly at work, refreshing the surface. Things like erosion, deposition from the atmosphere, maybe cryovolcanism filling in older features like impact craters. You don't see many large, old craters on Titan.
And the terrain itself is surprisingly smooth.
Over large areas, yes. Very subdued topography. The general variation in height is often less than 150 meters. You don't get towering mountain ranges dominating the landscape, although there are some specific tectonic ridges that can reach up to 1 kilometer high.
So what are the dominant features Cassini's radar revealed?
Two main types of terrain stand out. First, these vast dune fields. Sand seas, basically.
Sand seas, like deserts on Earth.
Sort of, but concentrated in the equatorial regions, generally between 30 degrees north and south latitude. And these dunes are big, up to 130 meters tall, maybe 1 or 2 kilometers wide.
But the sand, it's not sand like our beaches, right?
No, not silicate rock. It's made of coarse organic material. Essentially, grains of those tholins that rained down from the atmosphere, collected, got ground down or processed somehow, and then got blown around by the wind.
Organic sand dunes. Wow. And do we know which way the wind blows them?
Yeah, observations confirm the sand transport is primarily west to east across the equator. Consistent wind patterns.
Okay, dunes. What's the other major feature? Xanadu.
Xanadu. It's this huge, bright, reflective area right near the equator, roughly the size of Australia.
And it looks different from the surrounding areas.
Very different. Xanadu is an anomaly. It's higher standing, filled with hills, cut by valleys and what look like river channels. It's crisscrossed by these dark lines that might be ridges or faults. It suggests a lot more geological action, maybe older tectonic activity, or remnants of ancient drainage systems.
Why is it brighter, more reflective?
That's a key question. Much of the equatorial region is covered in dark, maybe methane-soaked organic gunk. Xanadu being brighter suggests it might be older terrain, where the underlying water ice bedrock is more exposed, or maybe the surface material itself is just chemically different, less coated in dark stuff.
And those valleys you mentioned.
Some of them show these dendritic patterns branching like tree roots. That's often characteristic of erosion by flowing liquid, maybe massive floods of methane that happened long ago when conditions were different.
Which brings us neatly to Titanian hydrology. The lakes and seas. Cassini confirmed they exist, right?
Absolutely confirmed. Though the large bodies of stable liquid hydrocarbons seem mostly restricted to the polar regions, above 65 degrees latitude or so.
Where it's coldest.
Exactly. Cold enough for methane and ethane to remain liquid on the surface year-round.
And these aren't small ponds. We're talking Maria seas.
Oh yeah, the Great Maria. Kraken Mare is the biggest, roughly the size of the Caspian Sea here on Earth.
Kraken Mare. Great name.
Isn't it? Then there's Legia Mare, the second largest, and Punga Mare. If you add up all the confirmed liquid areas, it covers something like 691,000 square kilometers.
That's a lot of liquid hydrocarbon. Do you know what's in them? The exact mix.
We have some good data, especially for Legia Mare. Cassini actually used radar to measure its depth in places the maximum depth measured was around 200 meters.
Wow, quite deep.
And compositionally, Legia Mare was measured to be about 71% methane, 12% ethane, and interestingly, about 17% dissolved nitrogen gas from the atmosphere.
Dissolved nitrogen, like CO2 dissolves in our oceans.
Similar principle, yeah. But other lakes show different mixes. Ontario Lacus, down near the South Pole, seems to have a lot more ethane, maybe 41% ethane, 49% methane.
So the chemistry varies from lake to lake.
It seems so. Maybe related to recent rainfall patterns or the local geology feeding into the lake.
Does Titan have tides in these seas? Saturn's gravity must have an effect.
It does. Titan is tidally locked, meaning the same face always points towards Saturn, much like our moon does to Earth. And its orbit isn't perfectly circular, it's a bit eccentric.
So Saturn's pull varies slightly.
Right, which creates a permanent tidal bulge on Titan, distorting its shape by about 100 meters. But it also causes gradual tidal cycles in the seas themselves. The liquid level is estimated to fluctuate by maybe 0.2 to 0.8 meters over time. Not dramatic crashing waves, but measurable tides.
Okay, this whole complex surface, the young geology, the dunes, the seas, it all seems to point back towards ongoing activity. Cryovolcanism again.
It feels like the most likely explanation tying it all together. The shapes of some landforms, like mountain ridges, and the way tectonic features line up often suggest the icy crust has been compressed or squeezed, or that the whole moon might be slowly contracting as it cools.
And we need that mechanism to replenish the atmospheric methane that's constantly being destroyed.
Exactly. The sources mention specific candidate cryovolcanoes, features with names like Doom Mons.
Doom Mons? Seriously?
Yep. Doom Mons, Erebor Mons, very Tolkien-esque names, and Sotra Patera. So Sotra Patera is interesting. It's a large depression with stuff around it that looks like flows, and Cassini actually saw it get significantly brighter between 2005 and 2006.
Brighter, meaning?
Potentially a fresh deposit. Something erupted, flowed out, and was more reflective, maybe fresher ice or frozen material before it got coated or weathered. It's tentative evidence for ongoing eruptions.
So the big question remains, is Titan still volcanically active today?
The indirect evidence is pretty strong. Think about argon-40.
Argon-40, a noble gas.
Right. It's produced by the radioactive decay of potassium-40, which should be found deep inside Titan's rocky core.
Yeah.
The fact that we detect argon-40 in Titan's atmosphere means there must be some process bringing material up from the deep interior, including gases like argon, and releasing it. Active geology, like cryovolcanism, is the most straightforward way to do that.
Because otherwise the argon-40 would just stay locked deep inside.
Or if it was released long ago, it would have dissipated or sunk out of the atmosphere over time. Its presence suggests ongoing release, ongoing geological activity cycling material from the core to the surface.
Which leads us inevitably to the search for life. This is where Titan gets really, really exciting, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's one of the prime targets in astrobiology. Scientists widely see Titan as a potential prebiotic environment.
Prebiotic meaning, like early Earth before life got started.
Exactly. A world potentially poised for the chemical steps leading towards life. Its atmosphere, mostly nitrogen, with hydrocarbons like methane, is actually chemically similar to what many scientists think Earth's primordial atmosphere was like.
But with one huge difference.
The lack of liquid water on the surface and the extreme cold, yeah. But the basic chemical ingredients are there, and the chemistry is happening on a massive scale already.
You mean the breakdown of methane creating those tholin?
Right. And lab experiments have tried to simulate this. They took Titan-like gases, hit them with energy like UV light, mimicking the sun's effect, kind of like the famous Miller-Urey experiment that simulated early Earth.
And what happened?
The results were astonishing. They successfully created incredibly complex organic molecules. Those tholins, yes, but analysis showed they contained some really significant stuff.
Like what?
Like all 5 nucleotide bases: adenine, guanine, cytosine, thymine, and uracil.
Wait, those are the building blocks of DNA and RNA?
The very same. And they also produced amino acids, the building blocks for proteins.
Wow. So the fundamental ingredients for life as we know it.
Were created in these simulations using just Titan's atmospheric gases and energy. And critically, this happened without any liquid water being present in the experiment itself.
So Titan's atmosphere is basically a giant chemical factory, churning out the precursors to life, even in the freezing cold.
That's what it looks like. It's actively generating the complex molecular ingredients needed, even in that cryogenic hydrocarbon setting.
Okay, so if life did get started, where might it be? The most obvious place seems like that subsurface ocean we talked about.
That's the more conventional potential habitat, yes. The ammonia water solution, maybe 200 kilometers down beneath the ice.
Protected from the surface, cold, liquid water available.
Right. Now, it would still be extreme by our standards.
Yeah.
Very cold, high pressure, lots of ammonia, which is toxic to most Earth life. But the key factors are whether it stays liquid, which depends on heat flowing from the core, and whether there's chemical energy available, maybe from interactions between the water and the rock at the ocean floor.
Like hydrothermal vents in Earth's oceans.
Potentially something analogous, yeah. If those conditions exist, it's definitely a plausible habitat for microbial life.
But then there's the really wild idea. Life on the surface, in the methane lakes.
That's the truly radical speculation. Life, not as we know it, using a completely different biochemistry. It really pushes the boundaries of what we think is possible for biology.
Because liquid methane is, well, it's not like water at all, chemically.
Not at all. It's a much weaker solvent. Things dissolve differently in it, so any life there would have to be fundamentally different from Earth life. It would need different molecules for its structure, for its energy.
Have people figured out how that might even work?
Researchers have actually modeled a hypothetical metabolism for these potential methane-based organisms, sometimes called methanogens, though they're different from Earth methanogens.
Okay, what's the model? What would they eat? What would they breathe?
It's really exotic. The hypothesis is they'd inhale molecular hydrogen H2, which is present in Titan's atmosphere. They'd react that hydrogen with acetylene, another simple hydrocarbon found on Titan, instead of using sugars like glucose for energy.
Hydrogen plus acetylene.
Yeah.
And what would they exhale?
Methane, CH4, instead of carbon dioxide like us. And this whole process would have to function at that incredibly low temperature, minus 179 Celsius.
Mind-boggling chemical adaptation. But could such a cell even hold itself together? You need a membrane, right?
Exactly. And our cell membranes, the phospholipid bilayers that surround every cell on Earth, are based on water. They dissolve instantly in liquid methane.
So a dead end.
Not necessarily. In 2015, researchers at Cornell University modeled a completely hypothetical type of cell membrane. They called it an azotosome.
Azotosome, meaning?
Nitrogen body. It would be made only of small organic molecules containing carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen, all readily available on Titan. No oxygen or phosphorus like our membranes.
And could this azotosome actually work in liquid methane?
The computer models showed it could. It would be stable and flexible at cryogenic temperatures, forming a barrier just like our cell membranes do in water. It basically moved the idea of methane-based life from pure fantasy towards something that might be chemically possible.
So the building blocks are there, the chemistry is possible. Is there any actual evidence from Titan itself that hints at this?
There are some intriguing, though ambiguous, observational clues, sometimes called the Great Disappearance Act.
Okay.
Back in 2010, researchers analyzing Cassini data found something odd about molecular hydrogen, H2. There seemed to be significantly more of it higher up in Titan's atmosphere compared to down near the surface.
Suggesting it was disappearing near the ground.
Exactly, a downward flow, and then gone. Which is exactly what you'd predict if hypothetical methanogenic life forms were consuming it near the surface, using it for that exotic metabolism we just discussed.
Wow, okay, that's suggestive. Anything else?
Yeah, the same study and others also found unexpectedly low levels of acetylene right on the surface. Again, acetylene is the other key ingredient in that hypothetical metabolism. If organisms were consuming it, you'd expect less of it on the ground.
So 2 chemical signatures that match the predictions for this weird life.
They do match, but we have to be really cautious. The scientists involved stress that non-biological explanations are still perfectly possible, maybe even more likely.
Right, you always have to rule out the simpler explanations first. What could those be? What else could be gobbling up hydrogen and acetylene at -179°C?
That's the tricky part. Maybe our models of atmospheric mixing or how gases interact with the surface are just wrong, leading to an apparent deficit that isn't real. Or maybe there's some unknown purely chemical process happening, some mineral on the surface acting as a catalyst, for example, that breaks down hydrogen and acetylene without any life involved.
So it could just be weird, cold chemistry we don't understand yet.
Precisely. It's an ongoing debate. The chemical signatures are tantalizing, but not definitive proof of life.
But the chemistry is advancing. I saw a recent source mentioning vesicles from July 2025.
Ah, yes, that was a significant development. Vesicles are basically tiny hollow spheres made of molecules like microscopic bubbles. They're considered important precursors for actual living cells, providing a simple compartment.
And they can form on Titan.
The study showed that vesicle-like structures could self-assemble spontaneously in conditions mimicking Titan's lakes, cryogenic temperatures, liquid methane-ethane mixtures. This supports the azotosome idea.
How so?
Well, the azotosome was a theoretical model for a stable membrane. This finding suggests that the basic physical structures needed these self-assembling spheres or compartments can actually form naturally in that environment. It provides a potential pathway for how those theoretical membranes could arise from simpler chemistry.
So moving from pure speculation to chemical feasibility, and now maybe even physical possibility.
Exactly. The path from simple chemicals to something resembling a primitive cell seems a little less mysterious, chemically speaking, even in liquid methane.
One last thing on life. Panspermia. The idea that life could travel between planets, maybe on rocks blasted off by impacts. Could Earth life have reached Titan?
Calculations suggest it's possible for microbe-carrying rocks from Earth to eventually reach the Saturn system. Yeah, the dynamics work out. Theoretically.
But could Earth life actually survive on Titan, in methane lakes?
That's the huge barrier. The chemical and thermal environment is just so incredibly different. Most researchers, like Jonathan Lunine, who's a leading Titan expert, think it's extremely unlikely. Earth microbes arriving there would probably just die. They're adapted for liquid water, not liquid methane at cryogenic temperatures.
So if there is life on Titan, it almost certainly had to originate there. Its own separate genesis.
That seems far more plausible, yes. A unique, independent origin story based on hydrocarbon chemistry.
Okay, let's shift gears to how we learned all this. Exploration history. It started with flybys, right? Pioneer and Voyager.
That's right. Pioneer 11 flew past in 1979, got some basic data, confirmed it was incredibly cold, confirmed the atmosphere was substantial.
Then Voyager 1 in 1980. That was a big one for Titan.
It was critical. Its trajectory was specifically chosen for a close Titan flyby. That's when we really pinned down the atmosphere's density, composition, temperature profile.
Like
but
haze.
the haze completely defeated it. Voyager 1 couldn't get a single clear picture of the surface. Just orange smog. It was only much later, using really advanced digital processing on the original Voyager images, that scientists managed to filter out some haze and get the first very blurry glimpses of large surface features, like Xanadu.
So the real breakthrough had to wait for Cassini-Huygens.
Absolutely. The mothership, the Cassini orbiter, arrived in Saturn orbit in 2004, and it had the key instruments: powerful radar that could pierce the haze, and infrared cameras that could see through specific windows in the atmospheric absorption.
And that's how we finally mapped the surface, saw the lakes and seas.
That's how. Over years of flybys, Cassini's radar slowly painted a global map, revealing the dunes, the channels, Xanadu, and confirming those vast liquid bodies, mainly near the poles.
And then came the Huygens probe landing, January 14th, 2005.
A historic moment. Titan became the most distant world we've ever landed on. The Huygens probe detached from Cassini, plunged into the atmosphere, deployed parachutes.
And sent back data all the way down.
Yeah, measuring the atmosphere, winds, temperatures. Then it landed. Softly, remarkably, near the equator, just off the edge of that bright region called Adiri. The landing site was later named the Hubert Curien Memorial Station.
What did Huygens actually see when it landed?
The images were stunning. It saw this flat, dark plain littered with rounded pebbles and rocks made of water ice.
Rounded, like river rocks.
Exactly. Clear evidence of erosion, smooth edges, suggesting they'd been tumbled or worn down by flowing liquid. It was the first direct ground truth confirmation of fluvial activity. Methane rain had fallen, flowed across the landscape, shaped these rocks, and deposited them there. Just incredible.
So after Cassini-Huygens, what's next? The next big mission is Dragonfly, right?
Dragonfly, it's an absolutely incredible concept, scheduled to launch in July 2028, assuming schedules hold.
And right at Titan.
In the mid-2030s. It takes a while to get out there, but Dragonfly takes advantage of Titan's unique environment.
How so? It's a lander, but it moves.
It's a rotorcraft, basically a nuclear-powered drone about the size of a small car.
Nuclear-powered. Why?
It uses an RTG, a radioisotope thermoelectric generator. Same kind of power source used on Voyager, Cassini, the Mars rovers like Curiosity and Perseverance. It converts heat from decaying plutonium into electricity. You need it because Titan gets so little sunlight, solar panels just wouldn't work well enough for a long-duration mobile mission.
And because it's a drone, it can fly.
Yes, that's the genius part. Titan's atmosphere is dense, much denser than Earth's, and its gravity is low, only about 1/17 of Earth's. That combination makes flying relatively easy.
Easier than flying on Earth or Mars.
Much easier. So Dragonfly is designed to fly potentially hundreds of kilometers across Titan during its mission, which is planned for about 2.5 Earth years. It'll hop from one interesting geological site to another.
Like a robotic field geologist? What's it looking for?
It has instruments to drill into the surface, analyze the composition in detail. Its main goal is to study Titan's prebiotic chemistry, figure out what complex organic molecules are there, how far chemical evolution has progressed towards life, and of course, look for any chemical biosignatures, signs of past or even present life.
Amazing. Are there other mission ideas being floated? Especially for exploring the lakes.
Oh yeah, the lakes and seas are hugely tempting targets. Scientists have dreamed up some really ambitious concepts. The challenge is obvious. If you really want to know what's going on in Kraken Mare, you gotta get wet, so to speak.
So a submarine.
That was one of the big proposals a few years ago. The Titan submarine, or Time Titan Mare Explorer. A vessel designed specifically to plunge into Kraken Mare, or Legeia Mare, and navigate the depths.
What kind of challenges would that face?
Huge engineering challenges. Building something that works reliably in cryogenic liquid methane, which is only about half as dense as water, so buoyancy is different. Designing propulsion, navigation, communication through that liquid. It would explore the composition, maybe look for temperature differences, signs of vents on the sea floor, maybe even direct evidence of surface life.
What other ideas?
Another cool concept was Talus. That was envisioned more like a boat or a lake lander. It would land on one of the seas, but crucially, it would have its own propulsion system, like propellers or thrusters.
So it wouldn't just drift.
Right. It could actively navigate, chase weather phenomena across the lake, maybe go investigate the shoreline where a river flows in, or follow up on hints of methane replenishment. These ideas really show the scientific drive to get into the liquid environment on Titan.
Okay, let's try and wrap this up. What are the big takeaways from our deep dive into Titan?
Well, I think we've seen Titan isn't just a moon. It's a complex, dynamic world in its own right. It's this frigid, hydrocarbon-fueled place on the surface, but likely hiding a warm, liquid water ocean deep inside.
It has this bizarrely Earth-like weather cycle, but using methane instead of water. And its geology seems young and active, possibly echoing processes from Earth's own ancient past. It's definitely not just a static ball of ice.
And the mystery of life there remains wide open. The subsurface ocean is, the more conventional potential habitat for microbes as we might understand them.
But the surface offers this truly exotic possibility. Life based on liquid methane, with that weird H2-acetylene metabolism, maybe using azotosomes for membranes. The chemical feasibility seems to be there, even if the direct evidence is still ambiguous.
Exactly. At the very least, Titan is this phenomenal natural laboratory for understanding how the chemistry that leads to life could start anywhere, under vastly different conditions than Earth. It forces us to think beyond just water-based life.
Now, this whole conversation, we've been focused on Titan, as it is now deep frozen. But you mentioned something provocative earlier, about the distant future.
Ah, yes. Thinking really long term, billions of years from now.
What happens then?
Well, our sun won't stay the same forever. In about 5 billion years, it'll start expanding, evolving into a red giant phase. Maybe a sub-red giant initially.
And it'll get much hotter, obviously. Radiate more energy.
A lot more energy. Enough to dramatically warm up the outer solar system, including Titan. And crucially, the type of light it emits will change too. The increased UV radiation might actually start to deplete Titan's atmospheric haze those tholins.
So the anti-greenhouse effect gets weaker.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The haze thins out, less sunlight gets absorbed high up. Meanwhile, the methane greenhouse effect, trapping the increased solar heat, becomes dominant.
What does that do to the surface temperature?
Models suggest it could raise Titan's surface temperature significantly, high enough potentially to melt the water ice and sustain liquid water on the surface.
Liquid water sees on Titan. For how long?
Potentially for several 100 million years. A temporary habitable zone, but a long one.
In several 100 million years. That's thought to be long enough for life to get started, right?
Yeah.
Based on Earth's history.
It's certainly within the realm of possibility, especially given the head start Titan has. All those complex organic molecules, the building blocks of DNA and amino acids, we know they're already being produced in abundance now in the cold.
So the ingredients are already there, waiting.
Waiting for the water, perhaps. The chemical evolution has already begun.
So the final provocative thought is, what kind of life might emerge then, when Titan thaws out in the distant future? Could it be a unique blend, using that rich organic heritage built up over billions of years in the cold, but adapted to a new, warmer, water-based world?
Or, perhaps even more profound, is something already stirring in the cryogenic darkness now, just waiting for its chance? It makes you wonder if Titan's story, the story of life there, is still just beginning.